news get hold of that, and it was, wow, the Muslim terrorists are getting finance. This liberal city of Seattle mayor is just giving them free housing for this thing, which is not the case. So what happened is the mayor have to convene funders, faith leaders, and community members to discuss about this issue. And what came out of that was Sharia was not the appropriate word, because Sharia has nothing to do with this housing finance. So they start calling Islamic housing finance. So, and I think it's the early stage, but I think it's something that might grow legs and may be visible. But I think that recommendation was very controversial in a sense, but it will be very good if they implement it, and there will be a lot of people who are going to take advantage. I, for one, I work, my wife works, my children works, but we still pay somebody else's mortgage. Why? Because of the interest things, and not only me. There are 250 or more business owners and who can afford, who are in this kind of situation. If you replicate that, there might be thousands who will be able to do that. And I think either City of Seattle Housing Authority as well as the county, they may have to look at it thinking out of the box in order to extend this kind of program to those people who are able to realize the American dream of home ownership.
Well, you answered my question by saying, do you think part of the issue was just having the word Sharia in there? Because I think that's one of those buzzwords for Americans.
Sharia is taboo to the American eyes because what carries in, people misinterpret the thing. But when you look at it, it was not quite appropriate word for that.
What does it mean?
It was, well, every religion have rules and regulation about it. So that rules and regulation about it, it is every Christian, Judaism, every kind. So that is the laws of that religion. So that's Sharia. So, but when it comes to housing, I don't think that it has anything to do with it. You can simply call Islamic housing finance or anything, or you can call all the names. But that name attracts a lot of bad publicity, in fact.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask one more question based on that, and hopefully I can hear from everybody else, is, that I hear that, targeting in one of the recommendations a community that has the ability to afford housing, homes, the purchase of homes. Do you think that financing tends to be the problem, or are there other underlying or overlying issues that are keeping people from affordable housing or accessing homes, accessing housing?
I think the situation that we face in Seattle is a pretty complicated one. It's both a question of supply, is there enough housing available, whether it's available at a price that people can afford, and then whether or not there are pathways that they can access the tools necessary to acquire that housing. Home ownership has been a goal and been an American kind of an American dream for forever as part of this country. But the median price of a home in Seattle is upwards of $400,000. So that is out of the reach of many middle class individuals, and so it's very difficult for them to purchase a home in that type of a market. Likewise, the rental market has also exploded in Seattle, and the rents have increased significantly, where individuals and families have a very difficult time paying for the rent levels that are also being in. So there's a combination of factors that drive that, but the fundamental problem is the ability, the amount of housing that's available, the supply that's there, and whether or not the individual earning power is sufficient to allow them to afford those prices.
And I agree with that. I'd like to add a few of my observations as well. I'll be vacillating back and forth from hat to hat, so try to keep up with me. As a community advocate and consultant, and also I can say as an elected too, I'm well familiar with the data throughout the county, throughout the surrounding cities. And affordable housing, homelessness, those issues that has to do with where a person forms a base to grow and develop and build their family, their life, their hopes, their dreams, their legacies, and all those things, the home, is systemic of economic, I'll use a politically correct term for it, but economic inequality, right? When you don't have people who can earn enough income to pay market rate, whether they're rents or properties, I think that's a huge problem. I'm surprised to learn that there is and I just learned something today from Muhammad, that there's a population, there's a group of individuals out there who can sufficiently afford to buy property, but for other barriers, other reasons, they decided not to. And one of the things that have became apparent to me was that that is a double disparity that we've yet to really see the impact for, because right now, over the past 5 plus 6, 7 years, with record low interest rates, record foreclosures, low property values, there's been a large number of individuals who've been able to take advantage of that. And I would stand to venture that they haven't been mostly people of color and people from the East African communities. And in the next decade, we're going to see legacies in terms of the amount of wealth that has been accumulated by these properties that people can't afford to own in a city like Seattle. And so they move and they go to different places. And I don't hear enough discussion about that. So I've served on the Committee on Homelessness for about 6 years, so I'm well aware of the homelessness aspect. I did an op-ed several years ago, and one of my resources for information is the King County demographer, Chandler Felt. And he shared some data with me. He told me that the fastest 2 income categories in King County are those individuals who are making over $100,000 a year, and those who are making $35,000 and less. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about the fastest 2 income categories are haves and have-nots, people that really can't afford to buy property. A friend of mine is the executive director in the Rainier Valley, Rizwan Rizwi, who runs the Muslim housing services. And he shares, the stories with me also about the issue. So I think that and I said this as a governing board member on the homeless committee, that we're not going to build our way out of this by, just building, temporary dwellings for people that are homeless. Ultimately, people want to work. People can work. They want to do it in a dignified way. They want to live the American dream with dignity. They want to be able to have a home they can call home, a neighborhood, a community that's safe, and that they can build their families in. And I think that income cannot be left out of this conversation, and that's one of the other things we need to work on as well.
Yeah, we will. Feel free to jump in if you want to at this point, and I have some other questions for you specifically as well.
Yeah, I work for an organization that services mainly families and individuals making under 60% of the area median income. So we don't deal a lot with folks that have adequate income to buy homes and have other barriers. But what everyone here said is true. The housing stock is just not enough. There's way more individuals that need housing at those income rates than anybody is building or developing or converting into affordable housing.
Can you give us a little brief history of Capitol Hill Housing? And you said that it's about to expand, but what was the idea behind it?
Behind Capitol Hill Housing? We started as a tool lending library kind of thing. We started as a very, very small nonprofit that helps support homeowners complete capital projects on their houses so that they wouldn't lose their homes. We've developed over the past couple of decades into a affordable housing developer and manager. We manage all of our properties. We service individuals that are making below the poverty line, so subsidized HUD or Section 8 housing, as well as quite a bit of workforce housing. and a little bit of market rate housing, but not a significant amount.
Do you tend to work with families, or does it tend to be like individuals and couples? Because you're talking about more densely urban areas, so that makes me curious about who is using your services.
Yeah, most of our housing stock is studios and one bedrooms. A lot of our properties that we acquired or purchased are brownstones and that have mainly been converted into studios or one bedrooms over the years. We do have some 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, but not nearly enough. I live in Capitol Hill, in that neighborhood, and it's very dense, and there are families that live there. It's a great place to raise children. There's parks and all kinds of amenities, but there's definitely not enough family unit housing there.
So that sounds like more of an issue of supply there.
Absolutely.
And it's curious because I know that there's been a lot of movement towards becoming more urban, so less of the sprawl and more into the urban, more city life. So how do we achieve that for our families without a supply of housing?
I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, I mean,
but besides lobbying the city to make regulations on building more family units in the area, because they definitely aren't as profitable as building one bedrooms when you're talking development dollars. So there needs to be some kind of municipal push to commit to housing families in these densely populated areas where there are more access to services and the amenities that those families need.
Would you be classified as a community development corporation?
We are a community development corporation.
what does that mean exactly?
Community development corporations, they try and spearhead the development of housing. And one of my, I guess, issues with community development corporations is their tendency to become co-opted. When they realize that most of the money can be made from people with a higher income than low-income people, then they espouse the development for low income and secretly build for moderate to higher incomes after they get city funding. So how would Capitol Hill avoid this type of this misrepresentation for public dollars as a nonprofit organization, and in reality you're organized behind some kind of backdoor approach for private development interests?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how. Besides to tell you that that's not our mission, I don't know how to specifically answer your question. We all of our new development all of our new recent development has been funded by the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, and they've all been 100% income restricted. We're heavily audited. We do build commercial and retail space that does get income in those spaces. But we also, our newest development included 2 community theaters for live theater to kind of offset the amount of art space that was being lost on Capitol Hill due to all of the condo development. So, besides to tell you that it's not our mission and that we wouldn't.
I didn't mean to interpret it that your mission is being sidetracked because Capitol Hill is under development and it needs space for single people, diverse people. So I just wish you all the best, and I keep trying to make that kind of income. You got yuppies up there, students, and they need those improvements of theaters because I shop up there at a Safeway grocery store, and I was teaching at community college up there at one time. So good luck.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that that's a question that could be posed to all organizations working in housing. And there's that kind of a fine line, I think a little bit of a dance that nonprofit does, especially when it comes to development. So I think that that is a really good question. How do we adequately fund, the number of housing that's needed for our populations without maybe reaching out a hand to corporations? And y'all on the panel would be much better at answering that, but I would imagine that's a very real reality.
can I finish what I said? These problems that we're talking about are not new. Since the advent of urbanization, beginning from the Industrial Revolution, these problems have arisen. But what has happened is that governments have been developing policies and programs to deal with it. That's why in the US in the 40s we had this residential sites like SHA manages. They were developed because government noticed these problems that we are talking about, and they tackled it by having this low-cost housing projects within the city. And so I think it's good, but we're talking about problems. I think we should be talking about solutions. What can the government do? And we want to be with you. We're not just pointing fingers. We want to be part of the solution. But we need policies and systems and programs that really help us deal with these things. And we will be talking about gentrification, I'm sure, next. But I think this is very important. That we have problems, yes, but we need solutions. Historically, there have been ways of dealing with these urban problems.
Yes, I agree with that. So putting on a policy maker hat, I think that you nailed that. Going back and weaving that question in about how do we find funding, and I want to say that I'm very happy to see young people here that have interest on this issue. That's very positive because I believe that if someone were to ask me what is over the 8 years you've been in office, what is the number one area of opportunity that you think can push the needle on any equity policy, I would say community outreach. I would say authentic community outreach. And the reason is because as policymakers, we are given the charge to utilize public dollars for a host of different things we provide. Public safety, roads, utilities, just a host, all types of things that we do in communities, parks, and so forth. But we are directed by the residents, okay, the people that are really our bosses, and so when I think about changing policies that work to solve problems like affordable housing, income inequality, and a host of other things, I think that voice should come from community members. And so getting people in the community more connected, and I'm talking about, and I know there's a lot of activism here in Seattle. You guys have a lot of activism going on, but there are other places where there's not as much. And even the activism that you have here in Seattle, some of you might say it's not pushing things as far as we want them to go, but still, nonetheless, that's what needs to happen. Getting people who, and I like to use the term residents. I don't say voters, I don't say constituents, I don't say citizens, because my experience has taught me that everybody's not a citizen. Everybody doesn't vote, particularly youth if you're not 18. Some people don't understand the word constituency, what it means and if it even means them. But if you're a resident, I like to break it down to a real common thing. If you are a resident, you're paying taxes. You're putting money into the coffers. The local, the state, the county, and the state and the federal coffers. People do things and we do things with that money, so you have a voice. And so that means taking ownership of your space, your city, your county, your state, and getting involved in the decisions that are being made and directing how dollars are spent to create opportunities for not just affordable housing, but how do you get people, opportunities to earn larger incomes so that they can get into market rate properties, do some other things. One last thing, I'll share this with you that I just learned about recently that I'm thrilled about. There's an organization called ADA or ADA, Developers Academies. Anybody ever heard of that? They are an organization that are targeting women. First of all, they do software programming development training for women, okay? They are looking for, and they target women of color, okay, minority women. Background, you don't have to have a background. They'll take just about anybody who's really interested. They have a process they go through, but it's a free training, tuition-free training for a full year. They even get involved in helping place the individuals. Now, check this out. They tell me that there's 25,000 jobs in the state of Washington that are available. 85% of the people in the software industry are male. And so obviously they're trying to populate that with more women. That's an opportunity. Those are the kind of things that I think about that can kind of change some of the dynamics of the disparities that we watch in our communities.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And Mr. Hudson?
Yeah, I want to take you in a different direction. In fact, there is a lot of housing issue within King County or Seattle, State of Washington. That being said, I don't know whether you guys are aware or not, in United States State Department every year, they bring 70,000 new refugees. That's standard for every year, 70,000 across United States. On top of that, they also grant 10,000 green card holders. Second, the third one is almost 150,000 work visas. Those software engineers, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, those guys. So, well, if I come back to the refugees, resettlement refugees, our state of Washington receives every single year 3,000 to 4,000. Every single year. Now, on top of that, we are number one second immigration, meaning people may be resettled in a different state, but they move here. So we are number one second immigration within. Now, then we have 5 resettlement agencies. So basically what they do is the resettlement agency contract they have with the state is 3 months. They will rent house in Kent, Federal Way, Auburn, whatever, for the family. And obviously you know that refugee families are not 2 or 3, 8 or 9 or 10 sometimes, which majority, because the 2 communities who have the highest household are Ukrainians and East Africans. Okay, Ukrainians are more than the East Africans sometimes. So what happened is the resettlement agency, they have a 3 years contract with the state to resettle with the Department of State. So they will resettle these people within area that they can afford. Though 3 months, the rent is going to pay by the resettlement agency. By the end of the 3rd month, you're at your own. So what happened? They have been in a lease for 6 months or a year. Then they have to break the lease. And guess where they come? Here. Because when you look at the state, there is no another place that provides shelters more than Seattle. So even though the beginning we are not resettling people in Seattle, but it's 85% of the resettlement are King County. Then what happened is after 3 months, people will come back to Seattle. So we haven't even placed those people in housing. Guess what? Next month again, number of people are coming. So this will never stop. So the federal government is really exacerbating the problem of the homelessness on all aspects. When you resettle somebody, there's a responsibility that you first and foremost, that's the basic thing, is housing and accommodation. That in itself, they are not providing. Family of 8, they are taking like $700 according to the TANF program, temporary assistance for needy family. Family of 8, they have to have at least 5 bedrooms. Imagine where in the state will $800 cover the cost of a 5 bedroom. So in fact, it's not really magic to figure out things how they are. You gotta have a plan when you resettle people. If you cannot, I can appreciate and I can express the role that Seattle Housing Authority played within this community. And that reflects why these people are still in a public housing, because nowhere else they can afford to be. So this is an existing problem. And I don't see any solution in the horizons. And this will continue over and over. We have approved to bring 50,000 Congolese from Congo to United States. And I think close to 100,000 from Syria, that's what I believe. I might be wrong. But every crisis in the world, we are bringing people now. The number one are Ukrainians because of war. and Burmese, who are called Rohingyas, who are the minority Muslim that had been, displaced their own country. So basically, we give a priority where the crises are. But resettling here alone is not only the solution, the end of the solution, because we are talking about housing, and we are talking about the current people who are in here now, let alone those who are coming. So I think, with due respect, I have a really high respect for Seattle Housing Authority. Just imagine, those houses are not there. Where will it happen? What will happen? Basically, the Seattle is going to be a white place now. Because
Caesar, I would like to interject something in the conversation. Since the theme is structural and individual or institutional racism, I think the conversation has predominantly been about economics. He has twice brought up an interjection of race and racism, stereotypes, xenophobia. The more you mention about the immigrants that's coming here, their dependency upon Seattle Housing Authority, you have the indigenous population of people here that are also poor, unemployed. You have loss of manufacturing jobs. You have a lot of people more and more now digging in the government well than ever before. And that creates also the stereotypes and misinterpretations about people by race. One of my issues about that, from observation of people in public housing, is that they get jumped on by the indigenous people who are already there. They plot, they put them in a state of fear. And my question is, regarding race, how do you assure that these people are going to be protected as a class? How do you ensure that the policies are going to be in place that gangs, Aryan nations, or any type of group is not going to put these people in a state of fear, invade their privacy? This is racism. The structural stuff was a part of that institutional, but the individual racism in groups, what kind of policies will ensure that these people will be protected as a class, and anybody else that are low income, and just because they're poor doesn't mean that they're not entitled to equal protection under the law? I'd like to address that to the Director of Seattle Housing Authority.
So, and actually, I think that's a great question, and I definitely want to touch on that, but let's have Mr. Lofton tell us about who Seattle Authority has been, the role that they have played in the history of public housing throughout the U.S. I know that there are several things that distinguish the Seattle Housing Authority within the United States, one of them being I believe it was the very first integrated in all of the U.S., and I believe it's also the largest, perhaps, maybe not the largest, but one of the larger. Okay, but the very first integrated. So we're talking about back in the 40s. So I had the privilege of working with a lot of Yesler Terrace youth in that property, and as they were learning, I was also learning, and so I would like for Mr. Lofton to tell us a little bit about SHA and then hit that huge question, but I would like to hear from everybody on that. Thank you, Dr. Perkins.
Well, thank you. SHA has been around since 1939, so over 75 years, and has provided housing, public housing, during that period of time to a wide array of the population. And it has been a entry point for a lot of immigrant populations through that entire period of time. There have been different populations, but there have always been a point of entry with respect to housing at the Housing Authority, and we're seeing that today with the influx of East African and Somali immigrants. A significant amount of our housing, up to I don't know, I think it's maybe as much as 30% of our residents now are of East African or Somali descent. So that is a role that we have played and continue to play as part of the fabric of the community. And that's fine. It's something that is appropriate for us to do. We also serve a total of 16,000 households in the city. 2/3 of those households are elderly and disabled. About 65% are persons of color. So we have a wide diversity of population that we serve, and it's not surprising that those statistics are that way, because it kind of mirrors the demographics of poverty as well. So it's not unusual to have our population reflect that. As to your question about individual rights, I think that's something that we all would agree that everyone deserves a safe, decent place to live, and everyone deserves safety in those areas where they live. And so our role and our policy is to ensure that individuals are safe, that they have the right to express themselves, they have the right to live a free and open life, and that they should be not subject to discriminatory behavior or discriminatory actions. And all of our policies and all of our actions are geared to ensure that that's true. When it happens, we take action against that, and I don't think we're any different than any other government entity or any other entity that provides services to low-income populations or racial or ethnic populations. So that goal is paramount in what we do, and it should be something that people expect and obviously deserve as part of their housing, that they should not have to worry about discriminatory acts or discriminatory behaviors from anyone, either residents or non-residents.
Thank you. Can you, I'm going to stick with you for just one moment. Can you tell us a little bit, just because Yesler, and I asked him to grab the newspaper for me, because there was this image you might have seen in the Seattle Times of Yesler Terrace. Whoever's not in here, this is one of those radio moments where you hear the newspaper going so you know what's going on. It's not dead silent, right? Okay, wrong page. Anyway, we've all driven by, I think, that Yesler Terrace corridor and seen the massive change from the baby blue colored homes, for the most part, to now a light rail tracks that run along there, to some super, modern looking buildings, to just so much more change coming. How has that transition been? I know that one of your goals, or one of, I should say, SHA's goals, was to treat this movement of people, rather than displacing them, but treating this expansion, or what can I call it, this redevelopment, essentially, into what it's going to look like in the future in a more humane way. But this is the image that we've been seeing, a fence, behind the fence, tons of construction, and then some more modern-looking buildings. And you could pass this around. I know one of the big losses for me, and prayers that it will come back, is the garden space, because a lot of the families there, be they Asian or East African, really used that garden space, not just because they like to grow flowers, but it was an important food source. So not only did that space, and many other, I think, housing authorities have garden spaces now, probably not quite that large, but so it provided housing, but it also provided sustenance, and it also provided jobs. So anyway, can you tell us a little bit about how that's been going from the vision that was set to where are we now?
Yeah, thank you. I'll be glad to. As I said in my earlier comments, Seattle Housing Authority has been around for over 75 years. Many of the units at Yesler Terrace had been around for that long. And so one of the decisions that we made was to redevelop that property and to renew it and to provide more modern housing for our residents. So the short answer is that right now the project is moving along very well. The project itself is designed to replace those, there were 561 of those baby blue painted homes that have been around for over 75 years. And Yesler Terrace vision was to redevelop that site to a community that was a mixed income community that had all the amenities of any modern popular neighborhood in the city, that we would replace the 561 units of public housing. We were going to add an additional almost 1,150, 1,200 units of affordable housing, so that housing that we've just been alluding to here that is not affordable, that is not available to individuals who are working and working at middle income jobs who don't have access to housing. We're, as part of that development, creating another almost 1,200 units of that type of housing for individuals to live there as well. So the whole vision was to take advantage of this opportunity to not only create modern housing for our residents, but to transform a community that would allow us to add to the city's housing stock around affordable housing and add to this housing stock in general. So there's going to be market rate housing there as well. So that what's there at the end is a mixed income community that has space for low-income individuals, moderate-income individuals, and high-income individuals. And we think that's a phenomenon that works for the city and works for the community, works for the neighborhood. But that's the physical part of it, right? And the physical part of it includes adding more open space than was there before through parks, through community gardens, through infrastructure changes. So we're changing the streets around, we're creating a green street, we're creating a pathways that will allow people to have exercise, et cetera. So all of that is important, all of that is what really people get we get most questions about, or how's that going? This is going to be a more dense community, and it is, and it's going to be on a transit line so that people have access to transportation. So it will be what's called a transit-oriented development neighborhood. But that's just a part of Yesler Terrace redevelopment from our perspective. And it's an important part, there's no question about it. It's a huge redevelopment, it's a huge capital project that we're engaged in. But what will make Yesler Terrace successful in our view is our ability to also address the areas around economic opportunity, health, and education for our residents. That they deserve the ability to overcome any barriers that have been in their way to be successful. And so part of that redevelopment also, what comes with it are emphasis and programs that are designed to increase economic opportunity, to increase educational and academic achievement, and improve the health outcomes of our residents. And part of our objective and our challenge is to make sure that when we do that, we do it in a way that is sustainable, not just for the residents that are there today, but the residents that are going to be there in the future.
So can I do one last thought on this little piece, and then I'll just in case we go sideways. I was going to ask, so you've got New Holly, or that area, and you've also got High Point, and then you've got North
Rainier
Seattle,
Vista.
Rainier Vista.
And we have Lake City Court.
And Lake City Court. So Was that same approach taken in redeveloping those areas, and what are the successes and the difficulties that you've seen that maybe better inform the Yesler redevelopment, since that's the last?
Yes, so New Holly was our first redevelopment. Rainier Vista and High Point followed very closely on his heels. Those were the more traditional, what we call family garden communities that had lots of acreage. Each of those sites were roughly 100-acre sites that we took and doubled the density there and created a community, a mixed-income community. And our experience that with those communities to date has been very successful. The communities are working together. They have the market rate, non-subsidized residents are working along with the individuals who are in subsidized housing to talk about what's good for their neighborhood, not what's good for someone who's in subsidy and what's good for someone who is not, but what's good for our community, what's good for our neighborhood, because we all live here. And that's what we're trying to foster, and we believe that we've had great success in those three communities. Now, they're not without challenges, and just like any other neighborhood has challenges. But from the perspective of creating the fabric of a community that has a diversity of income, a diversity of cultures, a diversity of populations, we have done that, and the communities themselves have continued to thrive. So we're very excited about that. We are trying to make sure that we apply the lessons that were learned, because there are challenges with those types of developments, and we're hoping that we'll be able to apply those at Yesler Terrace as we go forward.
Thank you. And I know that we're going to have a little more time focusing on SHA, because we have a short film that was worked on by youth. So I talked about employment. SHA employed several youth over the last several years, created a lot of leaders and also a lot of bonds with other community organizations. So we will do more on SHA, but if I can have Dr. Perkins ask his question and then go here and then over there. Is that okay?
I think I'm going to make this brief. One of the concerns as a community organizer, also, one of my issues as an activist community organizer is protection. It's easy for directors and politicians to sit on panels and talk the best case scenario. It's in their best interest. But being out there in the field, living out here in the conditions with these people, and my questions are about security, safety. What are the qualitative difference that's making an impact in the glorified things that you're doing, which they're great things, don't get me wrong. But are people, do they feel safe? Do they feel that they are protected when you have drive-by shootings? The housing authorities are cutting back on security in low-income situations with people that don't have money. And as a result, you have gangs who are developing in these areas. So people can live in the public housing. Okay, you achieved that goal. You got them off the streets. You got them in an afforded, subsidized house. But then they can't come out because of fear. They can't operate really inside those apartment buildings because of people spying on them. You have groups that are controlling these East Africans, and they don't understand what their rules are. They don't understand what rights they have. So how do you determine what is the qualitative effectiveness of the good works that you're doing in terms of actually making people feel not only that they're in a home, but safe, whether in a renting public housing situation or a Seattle public housing situation? And how do you gather this type of evidence to let the public know?
Okay, let me take a stab at it first and try to distill some of thoughts to your question. Okay, so the city of Renton, I'm wearing that hat. Okay, and we're not a model. You know, we're a city who has made some assessments and has, because of that, begun to start doing some things differently. Reaching out to the community, our East African communities, our Latino communities. We put together various different programs where we've put all of the materials that are important for communities to know in various different languages. That's pretty much standard. That's the best practice across the country. That's nothing special or unique. But there's a little bit more, and I have to say that I've been pretty active in pushing this in terms of years ago, that there's been disparity not only in connections that immigrant refugee populations feel with their cities, and I've looked at all of the cities from Renton to Seattle to SeaTac, Tukwila, Auburn, all of them. I know all their data. I've got all the data in my head because the disparity resonated with me. There's and then the other thing too, I guess I have to say, you're absolutely right, Dr. Perkins. There's a narrative that has misinformed, mainstream-minded people, and that immigrant refugee population somehow is, the other population. That disturbed me greatly, to the degree that I created a program, a training about 3 years ago, called Immigrant Refugee Integration, Successful Strategies for Welcoming Our New Americans. And it's a full-day, intense training that I do with my other hat, okay? And I've trained hundreds of people, nonprofit, government, private, and the whole idea is trying to get mainstream people to understand the disparities that they create with immigrant and refugee populations. I've served on the Domestic Violence Initiative with Prosecutor Satterberg, and have become very well versed. You touched on something about, the disparities that immigrant refugee populations experience in their own communities in terms of violence, that they don't feel they can report for a host of reasons, feeling that they might get deported or just a host of reasons. So the U-Visa was a project that I participated in with King County and helping communities to learn about that. In fact, I was brought in with the assistant prosecutor to an immigrant organization where there was a group of men who had a history. I won't mention the group, but they had a history of and a high rate of domestic violence, and it was really destroying their community. So I was brought in to convene some conversation regarding that. I think that it's a complex thing. We see the national narrative, okay, talking about wall buildings and all these other ridiculous things that are just completely, off base in terms of the value, the benefit, that our immigrant refugee populations bring to this country. No different than what happened, decades ago by the same so-called immigrants that, are being offended right now today. So I go back again to the community outreach, informing communities. I think education is a two-way thing. I think that the education that points towards getting people economic opportunities is crucial, but I also think that the education in terms of educating people how to have this conversation and turn the tide of the misinformation that creates these stigmas and these issues for people is very important. We have to get people, and the fact of the matter is that you look at all the data. You can make the moral argument, you make the economic argument. I make them both, I make them all. But the data shows that immigrant, participation in refugee participation in our communities is a plus. All the data shows that. There isn't any data that shows anything different. But yet we still have policy wonks that trot out these wicked, wild, points that raise the fear in different people, and we come up with policies that just don't work. We need bold, courageous leadership. We need people that will speak for the people, and we need people from the community to understand, their argument and to be well-versed and prepared to dispel it. And we need mainstream people, too, to do the same thing. We have some of those. We got some of these allies, but we need more to make the changes that we need to make.
Thank
Well
you.
said, Mr. Councilman.
Can to address that, or is it okay to take a
Yeah,
question?
in a different way.
Okay, please.
I would like to be able to really voice what the concerns are among immigrant and refugee populations that we've been conversing with. On the main, the understanding of immigrants and refugees is that the vision of the city government and its branches is for Seattle to be a vibrant, diverse, and flourishing and harmonious city. But there is a major deterrent in this area. One of the major deterrents is gentrification. And we are not talking only about physical displacement. We're talking about a lot of other ramifications: the cultural, social, economic, and political ramifications. These are very important, and they are not talked about. Culturally, if I remember, in North Seattle, in 2003, I think, or 4, the African communities, immigrant African communities, put together a dinner and invited other immigrants from other parts of the world and mainstream. And they shared their culture, they shared their food. And that created more of a community. People were understanding each other. We have had a community building there. This evolved into something more important, into a cultural structure, social infrastructure, where because the mainstream people, mothers, were understanding the predicaments of the African or immigrant mothers, they were going with them to schools, public schools, to speak on their behalf, to help them develop strength, to help them have a voice. They have become a safety net for them. And then, and economically also, people were having jobs. They had the proximity of living in areas where they had jobs. Politically, people were learning to vote. They were learning to vote not just by going to the polls, but to develop cultural, civic engagement concepts, to learn why they need to vote, to learn what policies they should support. But with gentrification, when they get dispersed, they lose all these privileges. They lose the cultural, their ability to share their culture or learning from about other cultures. They lose the social infrastructure and social network that I talked about earlier. They lose also the economic aspect. I know many parents who were moved out from West Seattle, who could not return to Seattle, who lost their jobs because of the distance. They had to move their children away from here. I know of a person who had a home here, a bit of home, but he said, all my friends are going away from Seattle. He said, I'm going to be losing voice. Who is going to be, all those people who had the same kind of thought, same kind of perception, same types of resolve, have all gone down to the south. I think we're going to be losing voice in Seattle. And he said, I thought of removing out, but he said, my children are going to university here and have to be here. So he was divided between, staying here because of his children, but knowing that he has become disempowered because his community, his constituency has moved out. And politically the same way. As I told you earlier, a lot of people had started to vote with intelligence, knowing what they should vote about. When they are displaced from here, the voices are, like this person said, voices are being lost. We don't know if our voices are going to be heard in Seattle. We don't know if our issues are going to be discussed by council members. We don't know. We're not certain because our voices have been divided. Most of our people have been driven out of the city. So we have to look at all these ramifications. We're not talking about losing a shelter or a house. We're talking about all these ramifications. And I think we should all be looking at these things very seriously and being able to share them with you, being able to find ways of solving them. We want to be part of the solution. We want to work with you. But policies and programs should come from the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yamana. That was actually a big thing that I wanted to talk about is gentrification. I want to be able to hear from everybody across the board on that, but I also want to honor some of the questions in the audience, but I want to come back to that. But thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, I would like to follow up. Dr. Watson is saying that what lessons we learned through the years that Seattle Housing Authority was helping to protect people with low income. And I would like to highlight two communities that not apart, but they are far apart when it comes to safety and security. And that is High Point community and New Holly community. And I looked closely for the last year what makes these two communities different. And I realized that the people who live in a High Point community, they know their rights of open spaces. Because when you provide a shelter to people, then that entity has also the right to provide safety on their open spaces. Now, if you look at New Holly, it has more higher crime rates coming from the new East African populations compared to the one in the in High Point. And one of the issues is Seattle Housing Authority puts a lot of consultation within the community, whether they are the immigrants or the low income or the homeowners, to make a better place. And I applaud it for Seattle Housing Authority. That's reality now. It's not any more imagination. So my question is, what are you trying to do to replicate that to New Holly? Because now, people who living before New Holly, sometimes I have a sympathy for them because of this new population, which doesn't have the means for themselves to integrate. Sometimes, without knowingly, they cause problems. And reality, sometimes we don't have only to protect the people. Sometimes we have to build resilience for the people to come back from the adversity that they are facing. And that can be done through having good jobs, having protection when they are not in their homes to feel safe, and also having a ways to integrate the larger community. And to my experience, I don't see that it's happening the way it's happening intentionally in High Point. And the only reason that I can say is the people who are moving through gentrification to High Point have more income than the people who are living in the South End, and how we can address that inequity. And also, I have another question to follow up to my fellow Somali citizen, Ahmed, which is, Mohammed Sheikh Ami, I'm sorry, which is mixing two things, the community and the office of the mayor. And I lived in Boston for 20 years, and I worked with resettlement agencies, which first started with good intention, was how to make mutual benefit the community and the city. But through the years, they intermingled, and the two hats sometimes became inseparable. And the voice I was hearing from House Sheikh was not the voice that will come someone from my community. And it really bothered me, and I'm so thankful that Dr. Perkins also addressed that. And once immigrants came to this country, they have all rights. It's not a privilege to be here. Once you've been admitted as an immigrant, then that responsibility is shoulders to the country that provided the immigration. It's not a country thing, it's a human right universal, which is to have a food, a shelter, and a safe place. And as you mentioned, all these three things are not there. And yet, sadly, you are finding an excuse for the same office that's neglecting that right, which comes sometimes to our votes. And that's something I'm not challenging you, but I'm just giving out as a, sometimes what we call, sometimes the emperor is naked. And sometimes in real that happens when people stay in the office, the first day they get elected, they forget the reality. And I hope that you bring back that, our voice back to the mayor's office, that this is not acceptable. Thank you.
Did anybody want to say anything from the panel? Mr. Hassan?
I would like to say.
It's okay, you can give it to him, I'll give him this.
There are different roles. City cannot play the federal government role. What I was talking about was federal government. City doesn't have any jurisdiction of resettlement or bringing refugees out of the country. That's the State Department, and they are the ones who are making the decisions. City is doing the best to accommodate that. I mean, it's a challenge. Yes, it's a basic human right. When you resettle people, they have to have those three basic things that you mentioned. I totally agree with you. But when it comes to state or city or county, it doesn't have that control. It is State Department. That's the federal government's role. We can't challenge. We can't even say that if you're not providing those basic things, you cannot bring people here. We can't do that. But this is a problem happening from the higher level of the city. The mayor is not going to control, King County is not going to control, even the state is not going to control. They are doing the best. When you look at the programs that the state of Washington has placed in for immigrant and refugees, we are the top when you look at the other states. The other states don't provide basically nothing, majority of them. But the state of Washington took extra step to accommodate those for those employment, ESL programs, training programs, so forth and so on. Even the TANF programs, the states have stopped way back to 1996 when Clinton stated about the welfare to work program. After 5 years, your TANF is gone. This state didn't accept that until 2008 because of the financial crisis. But still, there is a way of, waiving that too. This is one of the best states. The people that are moving here is because they see the benefit of this welcoming and accommodating the immigrant refugees. But unfortunately, it is not the matter again. It is the state of the federal government, Department of State controls this. We are doing our best to do that, but it's not our control.
So even though it's not in our local government's control, I have a hard time believing, especially when I've heard everybody say that our voices matter and that you want to hear from us. What is the best way to have the State Department hear us? Because I'm hearing, everybody in here as well as you guys, so I don't want to leave without saying there's nothing we can do, because there's one task force after another by the State Department, trying to figure out how best to support local governments. Give us that little bit of hope.
Yeah, we have elected officials. We have legislators, Congress, senators, and in fact, we have one of the powerful senators, Patty Murray. She was sitting the chair of the finance, and she's the one who's deciding. The more pressure we put those guys, the better result we may have from the state, even though now Republicans are the majority, Democrats are the minority, but still, when they intend to do something, they can work together. But this is, the legislator we elect in all aspects of life. That can have a huge impact.
Can I ask for a thought from you on that as a council member, how you want voices to be heard and passed on to this?
Sure, absolutely. You nailed that, yes. All politics are local. Local politics really do matter. If you look at people who often run for state representative, Senate seats, governorships, et cetera, they generally start out at the local level. Identifying who best represents your voice is crucial, but you can't do that if you don't have all the answers. Knowledge is power. They say there's two educations we get in our life, one that we get institutionally, and the other is the one that we pursue on our own because we're real interested about knowing something more than what they're teaching us or not teaching us through media, schools, and other places. Getting involved is critical. I try to break this down to a very rudimentary place. If you're a resident and you live in a city, it doesn't matter if you're an immigrant, a refugee, if you live in a city, a county, a state, you have power that you just haven't. It's almost like a person who has 10,000 or 50,000 or any large dollar amount in a bank account and they don't touch it. They act like they don't have it, but it's got their name on it, and they can make a withdrawal on it when they want to. You have power. Now, subliminally, from a narrative standpoint, based on the talking heads that tell us all the kind of things they think we should know, we get distracted from the truth of what that really means. Look at Black Lives Matter, all right? They just raided Bernie Sanders and, who's this other O'Malley guy? And look, these cats did not have anything on their agenda that represented or spoke to or resonated with their cause. Now they do. So you have a voice, you have to use the voice. That means getting involved. It was said, who's this quote? What luck for leaders that people don't think. Adolf Hitler said that, all right? How about this one? History is going to be kind to us because we're going to rewrite it, all right? Right. These are the kind of things that people think. So if you get involved on a local level, I love the state of Oregon. This new governor they've got, she's got a motor voter bill. She just whipped in there right away, which basically means that if you're 18 years old, you get put on the voting rolls when you turn 18, whether you want to or not. And you got to opt out. So she's going to increase the voting polls there by some 60,000 people. Now, how do you get a Senate that's Republican dominated? By people that's not voting, okay? Start out at the local level. Look at what's happening in your communities. I commend you for being right here. Knowledge is power. Get involved. Use your voice, and you can make a difference. We can get enough people that can speak to a state representative, to a Senate, okay, and various districts that can maybe start having this dialogue, this conversation.
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah.
But can I have him ask the questions?
Thanks. This is for the director of King County Housing Authority and Seattle Housing Authority. Thank you for earlier, Mr. Ahmed, telling us about the benefits the authority has brought to the residents of the city. That is great to hear. So I have two brief questions. The first one is, how does Public Housing Authority plan to help incoming immigrant community members to transition from low-income and dependent individuals and families to economically strong community members? I believe, or I suggest, providing small business spaces is crucial in changing these dynamics and the situation of low-income community members. How are you planning to provide these spaces for community members? The second question I have is kind of, I would love to hear your comment from everybody actually on this one. How do you see the developments of immigrant situation, current immigrant situation in Europe right now?
So I'll respond to the first question regarding how Seattle Housing Authority is approaching providing assistance to immigrant families to become more self-sufficient. And it's not limited to immigrant families, but we try to provide and try to identify the resources necessary, tools necessary for individuals to achieve their aspirations. We have a program in place that will do an assessment of an individual and their amounts of their skills, what are the kinds of aspirations they have, what are the kinds of professional interests they have, and give them referrals to areas that will meet those needs, and get them into the workforce training system to get them trained on the specific skills necessary for achieve that particular employment opportunity. So we do think that it's important to create those opportunities for people so that at the end of the day they have a choice to make. They have a choice about what's available for them and what they want to be able to achieve on their own. And we want to identify those things that we can support them, and either through directly supporting the training itself, or identifying the training opportunities for them and where they can go and get their own support so they can go through that, so they can get the kinds of skills, background, training that they want in order to achieve the employment aspirations that they have. It's a critical component of being able to become self-sufficient. It's a critical component of being able to make sure that people are in a position to afford their housing. And we think it's something that we ought to be doing, and we have been doing, and will continue to do. So specifically about business spaces. So in some of the new buildings that are going up in Yesler Terrace, there is going, as a requirement of zoning, there's a requirement that there be some commercial space in the bottom floors. And some of that space where we are working to make sure that it is less costly for small businesses to be in that space so that they can try and develop their own business and become successful within their businesses. Within Yesler Terrace, we also have had some consulting help to help individuals who are interested in going into business identify the steps necessary to get there, doing a business plan, what's involved in that, what's required in that, making sure they understand where the financing is going to come from for their particular approach. So we brought resources in to consult with individuals who are interested in going into business to say, here are the things that you have to make sure you take care of if your business is going to be successful. And so we'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to offer those opportunities for people.
I want to add up two things. New Holly, when you look at the New Holly buildings, there are businesses on Hotel and Holly that owns by Seattle Housing Authority, as well as you look at Rainier Vista. Yeah, both sides of those buildings are all businesses, and I think those businesses are run by those immigrant communities who are residents of those things. So I want to add up those two.
So I have a young lady right there who's been waiting to ask a question.
Hi. Is this loud enough?
No, use the mic.
Okay. Hi. Well, my question is a little bit more open-ended. I think the counselor member once mentioned that knowledge is power. And so recently an inner city private school around Columbia City that mainly served youth of color was recently shut down, and now a bunch of high-rise apartments are being constructed. Obviously, this is gentrification. So my question is, what are your thoughts and personal opinion about this? How does this impact youth of color in the community, and how does this impact their education? Also, a bunch of you guys are kind of talking about what the community can do so much things to prevent certain type of closures and, I don't know, community outreach. Again, what are the specific things that we can do so, youth won't be negatively impacted by these changes, and they have no idea what to do. What can I do? What can other people do?
So before the panel answers, can you tell us how it's affected you, seeing those changes?
Well, it hasn't really affected me personally because, I live in South Seattle, but I go to a private school all the way up in the North End. So it really hasn't impacted me personally, but I know it has impacted other community members. And I see that other students that I know have went to Zion Preparatory School, and now they've noticed these changes and they want to know what's going on, how can we fix this, how can we help other students.
Thank you. Before you answer too, I want to just emphasize that when we talk about gentrification, and Mr. Yamana brought some of these subjects yesterday, and I had one of these moments. Like, I've been to the Columbia City Farmers Market before, and I love farmers markets all over, but it was one of those things of how we've got a big word like gentrification, especially as young people. We might not know what that really entails until you walk into it, and then you're saying, wait a minute, very few people, if anybody even looks like me anymore, number one. Number two, how is it that some of these apartments, and I know one of them has gotten so much flack because for a 2-bedroom apartment in the same neighborhood is $3,400 a month. So I don't see, that as a, hey, let's create great, market opportunities. I see that as blatant racism, to tell you the truth. And we've been hearing this over and over again. So that's sometimes how gentrification looks and feels as well. So I really appreciate your question. And I know even if we're not necessarily in a particular neighborhood, the things that affects our friends, our other community members really does affect us too. So I really applaud you for your insights.
Excellent question, and very thoughtful observation. At first blush, I have to confess that, I'm not familiar with the school, not familiar with all of the circumstances, but at heart, anytime a school that is, historically educating kids of color, specifically black kids, I think that it's something that, you really need to be thinking this thing out, and you just don't do it without another plan that's going to be better, than, just shutting the school down. It's making an improvement that's measurable. That's a safe kind of a statement that I have to make because I don't know all of the other dynamics surrounding it. What can you do? Very good question. Wish you lived in my city. I could say, but good that you're here in Seattle. Go to a city council meeting. Contact, the city, and find out if there are any type of commissions, boards, things that youth can get involved in the city. Contact whoever, and I know that Seattle has just become a district, in terms of council members. They're not at large, meaning that they don't serve the whole city. They represent specific areas of the city. Find out who your council member is and send them an email. Okay, write a letter. Okay, and get some input in terms of or create some dialogue there. I think that would be a beginning. Excellent question.
I would agree, and I don't think there's any silver bullet in this. I mean, there's not a one answer that says this solves all the issues or problems that we're facing. I think it is fundamentally, though, still true that the way that you're going to have some influence or impact on things is to be involved, is to make sure your voice is heard, and whether or not that's through voting or whether or not that's through involvement in actual community meetings, public meetings, government meetings, about things that are going on in your community. Make your voice heard in that community. I don't think there's anything revolutionary about that or anything that is different than that. That fundamentally has been the way that people have influenced things throughout history. And I don't think that's changed today. But it is difficult because what we are seeing in Seattle is an explosion of growth, an explosion of change. And that's very, very hard on the existing population, the existing communities. But to manage that change or to address that change, you have to be there to say, when this change happens, here are the conditions that have to be in place in order for it not to negatively impact or to at least minimize the negative impacts on this community. Without that voice, it is going to gravitate to the highest and best return that someone can get, whether it's a $3,400 a month apartment or something else. But that message has to be, if that change is happening here, it has to happen under some conditions that are satisfactory to this community.
Thank you, Mr. Lifton. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I think it's important to consider why immigrants, refugees come to this country. There are many reasons, but there is one very important reason. Some of them come here because they are running away from a government that is not responsive, a government that does not listen to them. There have been some very intelligent people, very vocal people who were put in prison. Journalists have been put in prison. So I think it's good to understand that, and something that I will not repeat when I get out from this place is I will not tell anybody that I heard the city cannot do anything. I will not repeat that. I cannot believe in that. The city can be responsive. We are ready to make our voices heard, but we don't want to talk to the wall. We want to talk to people who listen to us and take action. And therefore, it is very important to consider both things: the importance of being involved civically, being involved in boards, having a voice, and then also on the other side, the importance of being heard. Because we are a civil society. We expect something from government. We want to do things civilly, we want to do it politely, but we expect results. We want our hearts, our heartaches to be understood by the government. And there are solutions. I know in Europe, cities have plans. They have city plans where it's known what is going to be built where. It's known that there is going to be affordable houses in certain areas because it's established from the beginning. Maybe that's what we need. We need a master plan for Seattle to make sure that we don't have to argue every time a development thing occurs. We don't have to discuss it. We don't have to argue about having affordable housing. It would be instated under law. It would be part of the law, part of the planning of the city. So the city can think about these things, preventive ways of making sure that there is not disfranchisation, there's not going to be disparity, there's not going to be any disempowerment of people. Thank you.
Thank you. And so please pass the mic down to you too. But before that, I want to say, if anybody else in here knows of other youth-focused ways to get involved with local governments, please share that information. I know that there is the Seattle Youth Commission that directly advises, or for lack of better words, works with the mayor's office. And I know that Seattle City Council is also has their own youth commission as well. So I can find out those specifics, and everybody knows. Please pass that forward. Okay, Maggie, thank you for your.
Okay, my question is directly to the SHA director. I am a community organizer, so in the month of June, I did a survey with 100 residents, not SHA residents all over, not refugee, immigrant, everyone who's low income. So from that survey, 70%, which is 70 survey out of the 100, the issue and the challenge was affordable housing. So my question to you is, I know one of my friends asked this, what are you doing or planning to prevent this low-income housing to become homeless?
And I think that could also be addressed to Brenton as well. So we can hear from both.
So it's not surprising that affordable housing is the #1 issue that people have as a concern. From the Housing Authority's perspective, our scope is relatively limited in terms of what we are able to do in the affordable housing front. We do have 8,500 units of housing that we manage, so we're going to continue to do that and have to make sure that that is made available for low-income people. And we also manage the voucher program, and there's another 10,000 vouchers that we issue that people have then able to go out and find affordable housing in the community. We'll continue to manage that program. At Yesler Terrace, we are, as I said, adding more affordable housing into the system than is there now. So at that development, at the end of the development, there will be 1,200 more units of affordable housing in the city than there is today. So when we have opportunities in our developments to increase the supply of housing, we do that. We partner with the city of Seattle. The residents of Seattle have, for the last, 25, 30 years, taxed themselves to create more affordable housing in the city. And we coordinate with them to help that housing be affordable for the lowest income individuals, and we will continue to do that. Where we have an opportunity to partner with other governmental entities and other nonprofit organizations and other organizations around producing and developing, acquiring, or preserving more affordable housing, we will use our authority as best we can to contribute and support that.
Okay, I'm going to have to apologize to everybody. I have another engagement I'm going to have to leave here and get to when I finish this comment, but that's a really good question. I've had the opportunity about 6 years ago to visit Seattle Housing Authority's work at the High Point Place, and I commend them on the thoughtfulness and the strategy and all of the different elements. It really did impress me, as a young council member when I did that tour. I've toured King County Housing Authority stock, and they've got a new project that they're building in Renton right now, and the Benson Hill area. And then, of course, we have the Renton Housing Authority. I'm very familiar with the work that they're doing. I did a tour with them just last year looking at all of the creative things. And by the way, our housing director has been very creative in making property acquisitions during downturn, the downtimes, foreclosed properties to create more housing stock. But at the end of the day, my conclusion, based on my observation, is that it's housing is critical. It's where we start. It's where we get up in the morning and we send our kids off to school, we go to work, we make our plans, we take care of our elders. It's where we do our living. And so that's crucial. We have to deal with that first. I can tell you that there are places where people get it and they're doing things about it. I recently learned of an initiative that is going on in Utah. Utah, of all places. It's called Housing First, Employment Second. The state has funded, they have funded a plan to house anybody who needs housing. They provide training, education, and then that's the first thing they do. And then secondly, they work towards helping you to get employed. At the end of the day, folks, it's about people being able to, live with dignity, have a place to live, earn an income. The gentleman up here that talked about, what are we doing to catalyze, economic development for small immigrant refugee business owners? That's what has to happen. We have to do those kind of things. Microloans, creative, not the standard, boilerplate rigmarole that disqualifies too many because they just can't meet the standard. That we come up with some very creative, thoughtful ideas that can really pull people in, and it can be done. Finally, I want to tell you that, for people that are here, serving on commissions and boards, if you're in parts of the, discussions where, people are having these conversations, speak truth to power, okay? And for those leaders who have invited you to that room, hold them accountable for making sure that they allow your voice to be heard in its full force and velocity. That you're just not another face there that, just kind of hits the checkbox. We got some diversity on this board, but we don't want to hear from you. Power never conceded to anything without fight. If you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu, okay? So you want to be at the table. I want to thank you all for having me here tonight.
And I'm going to put you on the spot one more time. Thank you. Because we didn't really get to Renton. Always drives me crazy that it gets left out. Renton, and it's always Seattle focused, and we're spread out, especially as East Africans. So Renton Housing Authority actually has a 7-year waiting list. And I know that they get the trickle-down effect from Seattle, and I know that Seattle is expecting just for Amazon alone, I believe, another 77,000 more employees by the end of the year. So so people have moved from Seattle, they keep saying south and further and further and further. I've been resident of Renton since 2004. So I feel deeply about this. Jobs, as well as housing, as well as other resources that I feel like, especially resources for youth, that I feel like Seattle is really exemplary actually in the country. I've lived in many places around this country. So can you just respond quickly to that piece, or
Sure.
are there any, what is the projected goal of addressing all of this influx?
Tazita, I just have to be, blunt and honest with you. The demand is, okay, so let's walk it back this way. I serve on the 10-year plan to end homelessness. Been on that board for 10 years. 6 years, I'm sorry. And I do the one-night count. Everybody know about that. The one-night count, we do it in January. We go out, we count homeless people. That number's been going up, and it's not surprising to me. And the reason it's not surprising to me is because when you look at the economic disparity, economic inequality, and you know that the fastest two growing incomes are folks making over 100. Seattle, look what the high tech's, going on down there. They're, bringing people in from all over the world, to get these high tech jobs. And frankly, we're not growing enough homegrown folks with the, baccalaureate degrees to be able to take, on some of those positions, not all of them, but some of those positions. And so we create this demand to have to go outside and get it elsewhere. And the fact that moves people out of Seattle, places where they can live like Renton, Kent, Auburn, Federal Way, and those kinds of places. The demand is great. I had this same concern several years ago when I had someone at a grocery store tell me that she has got a voucher for, housing for, Renton, but she's been told that there's a 3-year waiting list at that time. That was about 2-3 years ago. And, it's because that we're not able to transition people out of, public housing to create more space. See, in my view, people shouldn't have to get into public housing and make that the last stop. Okay, you get there, we need to help you now, okay? You get help just like you get in an emergency room, okay? But we also do strategies, and that's what I like about what, Mr. Lofton and the Seattle Housing Authority is doing in terms of helping people. And I did learn something when I went to his site at High Point. I learned that, that people sign contracts, that youth are accountable. You've got to be in school or working, that if you're not cutting your grass, somebody's going to come by and cut it for you and give you the bill. That they're really holding the residents accountable, living, in a multi-socioeconomic dynamic, which challenges them to, step up and, learn how to do things differently also, and ultimately hit that plateau of market rate and make space for somebody else to come through. I don't think the solution is that we just keep building affordable housing. I think that has to happen without question. Don't hear the wrong thing, folks. I'm a huge advocate for affordable housing, but I'm a bigger advocate for economic equality also.
Well, thank you for coming. I know that we did start a little bit later as we had finished a youth program graduation, so I do want to honor everybody's time. We were going to show a short documentary on the Yesler Terrace redevelopment that youth have done over the years, and there's quite a few that are fantastic. So what we'll do instead is that we will link them onto the website, and this will be streamed as well. But I want to acknowledge the gentleman who's been super patient.
Thank you. So this question is for Mr. Lofton. After the Yesler Terrace project is complete, what will be the total units there, residential units?
So we expect it to be somewhere between 4,200 and 5,000 units after it's complete.
And so only, of the 5,000, only 1,200 are affordable housing?
So we're replacing the 506, there will actually be roughly 1,800 that'll be affordable. So that we're replacing the 561 public housing units. In addition to that, we're adding about 1,200 affordable units.
So addition to the 5?
Yes. So so there's roughly 1,800 low-income units that will be at Yesler at the end of at the completion of the.
So the rest will be market rate?
Yes.
Do you know what the market's going to be from kind of right
No,
now?
whatever the market is, it will be. We don't have any way of determining that.
Kind of forecasting.
Well, what we can tell you is the market rents that are currently in and around Yesler, we know what those are today. I don't know what they will be, in the future.
And so the future is, when will this project be done, the whole project?
So we're have a time horizon of between 10 and 15 years.
Yeah. So I just, and to,
Hold the mic
oh, I'm
closer.
sorry. And to my African brothers, I don't know if this is going to be a controversial question, but I don't see any Black Americans on the panel, and I'm feeling a little like this is not about, and maybe it is designed for this. Maybe this is the kind of program, but I don't see any Black American representative here. So how did that work? No, not you. You don't count. I mean, you're no. When I say that, I don't mean that being critically. I think you know what I mean. Right. So was this designed for immigrants?
Well, so also Mr. Greg Taylor, I believe, also identifies as.
No, I'm talking about
What do you mean?
community as a whole.
I don't know if I'm understanding the question. Oh, okay.
Who are the
Is that
panel?
what I mean?
Yes.
Who are on the panel that are not government officials?
And so this program was designed specifically for immigrant population?
Well, so thank you for your question. So this program was designed in part to respond to a lack of communication between the East African communities and experts, be they government officials, Seattle Police Department, housing authorities, job or work enforcement authorities. The next panel that we're going to have is actually focusing on jobs. While it's not excluding, the intention is not to exclude anybody, and I actually love, I was thinking about more diversity I'm seeing today than I did at the first one that was focused on Seattle Police Department. It is geared for the East African population to be able to have that direct link. Does that make sense?
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of. Well, I'd be happy to explain further if anybody else. Give me 1 second.
This is a good question in that I hope it will encourage us in the future to work together. We have some African American brothers in the audience that I respect and know a lot, who have been helping and working towards bringing some kind of unification, unity, solidarity between new Africans and African Americans and African Americans who've been here for centuries. And so I hear you. I think that's something that we need to work upon, not only for this kind of meeting, but to be together everywhere. We would like to be part of your constituency. We don't want to create our own constituency. We're Black, but we need to be accepted. We need to be working together. We need to find ways of working together. So I hear you, but we need it requires some effort, and I think we can do it.
So who are those brothers?
Sure.
3, 4, 5. I just want to say something about the gentleman over there said about this is a African American issue or immigrant issue. That's what I was thinking before too, because what I hear here is all about it like East Africa, East Africa, East Africa. We're not dividing right now. Why not you say like African? This is like one of dividing rule. We don't have to be like divine rule here, We gotta come together as an African. Why should we, this problem is Africa? This is not African problem. This is like West Africa. This is not South Africa. We're not outcasting now the rest of Africans here by just saying like East Africa. We should be, this is African problem. It's not just African problem. Matter of fact, this is African American problems, That's why the colony is dividing us. By saying like, this is a legacy of colonization. When people divided you by color, and they divided you by race, and divided you by country, divided you like West Africa, East Africa, this tribal war, and everything is going on here. We reflected it here. We don't have to reflect it. The gentleman over there question is a great question. This is what I was feeling before he come up with this question. This kind of things really upsets me. You know, this has been to this been. I mean, we don't know about African American culture. African American culture, youth, they don't know about our culture because we live together. They scared us, you know, because we are here, right here in this room. We just talk about East African. Why you talk about East Africa? Why don't you talk about African American? Is this African American who have the same problem? They just kick out from this Rainier Valley. They've been living in East Africa, African American. They've been kicked out. Not only immigrants kicked out, the African American kicked out. Where are they? Why don't you talk about those people? Why just talk about East Africa? What is East Africa? We are only one Africa. As long as we black people, we are an African. It doesn't matter where you, Caribbean, Jamaica, African American, we black people. As long as we stand up, we're standing up as an African, we're not gonna go nowhere. Because unity is power. Unity is power. It's dividing us, you got to be united to hear our voice. You know, see, it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, for 3 hours, we're talking about East Africa. This is not East African problem. This is black people problem. So we have to address this problem as black people. As we have to be one. Black people don't have to scared. Immigrants youth don't have to scared African American. How come I don't see black people and African American youth and immigrant African people, immigrants come together and talk about their culture? They don't exchange their culture. You know, they shoot each other. Because why they shoot each other? The white people don't shoot black people. So what I'm saying, let me finish. What they say, so it's not just housing problem. It's not just housing problem. We got to learn about our culture, everything. We got to live together. We got to talk about all black people. Well,
amen to everything you just said, and definitely amen to everything that you just said. And I know that earlier we talked about doing this throughout the year and not just this year. So this is only 2 of several conversations that need to be had. In order to try to, get to each really significant point, we have to break it down. You know, we would all be here, you know, if we could all stay in a room for the next year, we still wouldn't address everything in one meeting for, you know, and you're absolutely right. And part of the reason for breaking it down is addressing the specific questions of the specific communities. So it's definitely not meant to isolate whatsoever. There are some issues, I know that we heard a lot about immigrants, that is very common to immigrant experience. So we address it accordingly. And same with other things. Now, culturally speaking, I completely agree with you, which is why I want, and I always push people, you know what, there's the Umoja Fest. How many people went over there? Excellent, right? Throughout the year, there are cultural programs in every community center, every cultural, and I'm telling you, I hustle to make it happen. I know so many people in here to make all that stuff happen, but the bodies and the people don't show up. And those that show up tend to be the same ones, and those that show up to do the work also tend to be the same ones. So get in there, do it. I really applaud you for it, but I also want to see your faces there, and I want to see the dollars spent within those communities, you know, and I want to see that baton being passed on so that it's more and more and more people who are doing the work and not just a very, very small few who probably get really exhausted, you know, and who are not really generally supported in a lot of this work, you know. So I thank you for that, but I also want to, I don't want to feel like we're not doing anything about it. Like this is something, this is us being active. So I want to acknowledge, like I need to maintain positivity about, you know, efforts that are being made. So Mr. Hassan had a statement, then let's go to Mr. West. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, Tsege. So I'm going to go to Tsege before you, okay? Okay,
Thank
please.
you. I mean, just want to add up. This is only program aspect of it. When you see funding, you'll be given an assignment, which is you write a proposal saying that this is what I'm going to talk about, this is the target community that I'm dealing with, this is what I'm going to follow. This is coming from Office of Civil Rights, and it have different components to deal with: employment, housing, safety. So this is in response to the proposal that was funded on this aspect of it. So it was specifically mentioned to those specific things for target community. That being said, I'm a father of 6. I lived in this town for 23 years. I mean, my kids graduated from college. They are more African American than the Somalis. Absolutely. They are African American than Somalis. The fact is, we as an adults still have the mindset of Africans, but our children are all African Americans, number one. When they go to class from the kindergarten, they are not given a different name. They're all black, all the way to college or all the way to employment. So this generation is saying that we are too different. I don't believe that. I mean, my kids, I'm talking about, and majority of the kids that I saw are more than what they claim. They don't think themselves as East Africans. They think they're black, and that's what they're supposed to be. But our generation, for myself, I'll keep saying I'm East African, because I was grown up and raised there, but these kids that were born and raised here are not absolutely immigrants and refugees. They are more African Americans than anything, and they are more active than everything of us, and they have the right. So that being said, well, we are all in the same boat. No matter what we call ourselves, we have same issues, same problems, and this will not stop here. I mean, it was going on for years and centuries, but it will take time. I have a hope, because now kids are becoming more productive. I mean, the fact that, to my surprise, the latest plane what they call Dreamline, to my surprise, is the manufacturing manager is a Somali. So that, there are more Boeing employees than government employees. When you look at this private company, they have high number of immigrants and black people working for them than the government. So there is a hope that at the end of the line, things will be different, because those kids that we brought here are getting educated and they're becoming a quite contributing member of society. I'm a father. My daughter is an engineer. She's an engineer for 777. She managed the white folks. And the question she had is, she was a little tiny, in fact. She had is, what they call the mechanics. She's an engineer, but the mechanics come under her supervision. And she's a very strong woman, short woman, African woman, instructing them. And the question is, where the hell did you come from? How did you get this job? And then her background said that she was a refugee, she was in public assistance, she was receiving TANF, she was in low-income housing, all that. That being said, and then she achieved that. And she's not the only one. There are many more like that. So I have a hope, and great aspect of life will change. But yes, we get together in order to do better. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Mr. West, you got the mic to be passed on?
Yes. I'll just be very brief. First of all, I would like to commend the panelists. Just a diversity of ideas and input on some of the roles that you're playing in helping to make the situation better. But more specifically, and Tizita, thank you, you're doing a great job. It's been a long time. But more specifically, what I would like to say is this. From some of the panelists, some things that I've heard, one of the things, the gentleman, he left, but he was talking about Utah. And then I heard someone say earlier also, talking about how Seattle is a main point where many people come, refugees come, not just refugees. I'm not originally from Seattle, but I came up here because of my technical skills, because this area needed those skills. But the companies, the corporations are also going to other areas of the world getting people with those skills. Now, my technical skills, and I'm saying this because you can really piggyback on some of this no matter what role you're in. I'm saying it because when I was much younger, high-tech industries, I was in Los Angeles at the time, high-tech industries saw a need for people with certain technical skills. And those companies, what they did, they put together the money and they provided a particular college there in Los Angeles with that money, and they paid people to learn those skills. So ideas, out of this should come ideas, and also of connecting the dots. So people come here to Seattle, and this is an idea for some of you, and especially some of the youth who were here, some of them left. But connecting the dots, when you see people coming to Seattle, and they're coming in large numbers, they're coming for different reasons. Some of them, refugees hear about, okay, there are good government benefits up in Seattle, so we're going to go to Seattle. Different people come up here for different reasons. I came up here because there was a technical need in Seattle. There were corporations that needed my skills, T-Mobile, other companies all the way down in Bellingham. So that's why I came here. So the conclusion of where I'm going is this. Connecting the dots. Some of you look at this situation, and if you connect the dots, and if you know what the gentleman who left had stated about Utah is providing housing. That's the key. Housing first, jobs second. Now, it's a matter of tapping into what's going on in certain geographical areas. You could be that person who tap into what's going on in certain geographical areas in the country. And then you connect people here. When the youth come into the house, they grow up in the housing units under Seattle Housing. And some of them are talented. So you identify those youth and you put them through education programs. There should be a vision where those individuals are not necessarily going to spend their life here in Seattle, but they're going to look at another area where someone else is connecting that dot. It might be in a different city. So you're moving them through Seattle. They're getting the benefits. They're not forever staying in public housing. They're getting the benefits, and they're moving out to another city, another geographical location, based upon the skills that they have learned as young men and young women. That provides for also, as refugees are still coming in, that lowers the population count, because they're not looking at Seattle as I'm going to stay here forever, just as you're not looking for people to stay in public housing forever. So I just wanted to put that thought out there, because government entities have a role. But I think each of us who are sitting in these meetings, these public meetings, where ideas are floated around, we have to look at, because the main solution actually comes from us. It comes from what we are able to bounce off of each other and then develop into something that is going to actually build the type of situation that you want. So, and lastly, I'm going to close with this, but I understand what the gentleman is saying about African Americans, African immigrants, no matter where you're coming from. The greatest thing that you can do, is find ways to unify. Okay, that's the greatest thing that you can do. And Seattle is one of the best places in the country to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. West. And final word to Gabe, because we are a little bit over time, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to thank everybody. And of course, there will be maybe before everybody runs off, maybe you'll get a chance to exchange names or information if there are any further questions. So please, can you get?
Waiting for housing, for waiting list, and then the housing, agency gives, for, the homeless, of course, they need a place first, but the other people are waiting for a long time and they don't get this housing. What kind of program do you have for them? The other one is, there is some people in Seattle housing, but the rent is very high, especially when a new building, builds, there is water, they pay a lot. So most of them are, maybe if I lose my job, that will be helping me. That's why, they are staying there. But, the housing rent is not affordable for some of them. Before it was 30%, I don't know now. When I see their income and their payment is really not that kind of balance. So, and the other thing is just, I want to say it because it bothers me most of the time. I go to New Holly, and sometimes the road is really narrow. If something is happened, I don't think the fire truck will go there. So that is, what kind of idea or plan do you have, to reinforce, the car parking on the street? It's always bothers me. Just I want to share that.
Thank you. That's been brought up before, so I can understand that. Well, with respect to the wait list, that's a real problem for us, a real challenge for us. We only have a limited amount of housing availability. We only have a limited amount of vouchers, and that's all. And when that's full, that's full. And if people aren't moving through the system, then those opportunities for people to come off the wait list just aren't there. And so we have a real struggle with the individuals who are on the wait list who have been there for 3, 4, 5, 6 years in some cases, simply because we don't have enough housing for them. And we don't not have an answer to that. The question of how we help people become more self-sufficient so that they can move away from subsidized housing is one that we still struggle with, and we're still looking for ways to help people do that. But we do not have an answer for folks today who are on our wait list because we don't have any housing anywhere for them to come to. With respect to the rent structure, the rent structure hasn't changed. You still pay 30% of your income for rent if you're in public housing or if you're on the voucher program. There are individuals who have come to New Holly or High Point or Rainier Vista who are in what's called tax credit units that are different, and that's just a flat rent. To qualify for that, they had to have a particular income, and then their rent is whatever that flat rent structure is. And in some cases, people are in those units, and that rent does escalate over time, and is not based on income, it's just based on a flat rate. And that's part of a low-income housing tax credit program that Tristan mentioned that Capital Housing is doing, that others are doing as well, and so that might be some of what pressures that people are feeling. I don't know the circumstances, and we'll have to look in that individually. And then the streets of New Holly were designed to be that narrow, and what we have to continue to make sure we enforce is as you say, the on-street parking, so that there's only supposed to be parking on one side of those streets, and in some cases no parking on those streets. And we've got to do a better job, if that's a problem, of enforcing that, so that if that is maintained, then the fire trucks and emergency vehicles, there's enough room for them to get by. If people are violating that and they're parking on both sides, then that would be a problem, and obviously a public safety problem. So we've got to, if that's going on, inform us, and we'll make sure that we enforce it.
Okay, it is time.
Thank you. Yes, I am going
Can I have
to
one?
close. Well, I just want to ask Tristan real quick. Is there a long waiting list? I can go ahead.
We routinely close our waiting lists when they wait too long. We find that having waiting lists that are 7 years or 5 years don't really adequately serve anybody. By the time you get to somebody, it's been years. Their contact information might be different. So every year we do an audit. We contact everyone that's on our waiting list, remove people that have found other housing opportunities or that are no longer in the area or not interested in our housing, and try to keep people's information up to date. I think on our open waiting lists right now, we have about a 2-year wait period for most stuff. Yeah.
Well, we will definitely be stay abreast of all of the housing. The beginning of a conversation that we hope that the communities continue to have, and know that you can reach out to all of the different panelists that have spoken with us, and even more. I know community centers really serve as a good resource, a bridging resource. So I would definitely encourage that. On the website, we'll post the Yesler Terrace video. There's a few of them that have been really, really fantastic. I know there was a new one this year too, so I'm excited to see that one. And then we'll also post some of the resources like the ADA that Mr. Taylor had brought up, because I really hope that people walk away feeling like they aren't just hearing words, but can maybe access some sort of resource. Sometimes there are waiting lists. I'm definitely in that stuck position and needing to have a little bit of hope for myself and my family. And I'm not necessarily the ideal candidate because I'm not homeless or I'm not a recent immigrant and I speak the language, and yet I still struggle, and I think a few of us in here do because of what's happening with the prices of homes. So it is something that's dear to me, and as a community person, if I can support whatever this process or lend a voice, and I hope along with all of you, because we need to do something about this for sure, and cannot just hear only from governments. Please.
I think thank you very much for coming. Really, our time is limited, and we passed the hour actually. Thank you for staying a little bit, already 35 minutes. And of course, when we do this kind of project, actually, this is, everybody has their own limit. We have a small organization, which we are getting this fund from Social and Justice Office. So I think there are so many questions around that raised, about how we can come together. I think that's something also we have been working. If you came here the first program, there was about actually young people who have been here, an issue. We did a project about African American. Of course, that's most of the users that have been here in the project were African Americans, and we have been involved for the last 10 years within African community. And I think before we, divide or something ideas, we have to appreciate what we are doing right now. And let's start. If you are an input, I think this is a time to collaborate and give us your information so we can go next. I think we have a lot of time, we can continue. So with that, I think our time is limited. But if you guys, if you want to continue, I think this is the first time, so let's come up together. I think that's what I would like to say, and our time is already passed. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.